So has this ever happened to you? You've got your long-range rifle, you've got a confident zero at 100 yards, you've got a good number for your velocity, whether you found that online, whether you used a chronograph, you're confident in your velocity number. You line up on that 1,000-yard target, send your bullet down range, and find that your impact is way high or way low versus what your ballistic calculator called for, even though you're confident in the data that you put in. Well, if that's happened to you, or if you're curious why that happens, stick around, because in this video, we're going to talk about truing your ballistic coefficient. Sure, bullet manufacturers publish ballistic coefficient number with each of the bullets that they put out. And that's a great place to start. But what you're seeing when that happens is an error in the ballistic coefficient number. What I want to do in this video is show you how to clean that up and true your BC for your specific rifle and bullet, so that when you shoot 1,000 yards, you're confident where your bullet is going to go. So if you like the sounds of that, stick around. We're going to talk about the gear I'm going to run. I'm going to talk about the process, and then we're going to go out and actually do it. Before we start shooting, let's talk about the gear we're going to run in this video. Now, if you've seen some of my previous content, I'm guessing you probably recognize this rifle, or maybe recognize its former configuration. I actually just changed things up a bit, and we'll talk about how and what I did here in just a second. The heart of this rifle is the Pristine action. I'm pushing probably 1,000 rounds on this action now. Very happy with how it's performed. The bolt throw is very smooth, very positive ejection. But what I really like about this action is the Savage pre-fit configuration. That means I can swap barrels out myself at home using tools I have on my workbench and a set of go, no-go gauges. So as I mentioned, I just swapped this barrel out last night. I removed the 20-inch carbon fiber proof 308 barrel and installed this 16-inch 6.5 Creedmoor barrel from Outlier. Outlier is a fairly new barrel manufacturer, but I'm really excited. They sent me this for use on the channel, but they have a sub-MOA guarantee, and I cannot wait to find out if the barrel is going to live up to that reputation or not. We'll know here soon enough. For a suppressor, really excited about this. I just got the approval paperwork in on this. This is an Ottercreek Labs Hydrogen L 30 cal suppressor. Really like how this shorter barrel pairs with the full-size can. This is going to be a very quiet, light recoiling package. Chassis is the MDT XRS. This thing is kind of a traditional feel of a rifle stock, but it gives you the benefits of a chassis, no bedding, nothing like that. Also like the fact that I can throw a weight in the fore end of this thing. So currently I am running a weight as well as a very heavy barrel up front. There's not going to be much movement out of this rifle when I fire it. For an optics package, we're running the Arken EP5 5-25, and you'll be looking to the scope with my trigger cam 2.1. That's going to give you a first-hand view through this scope, which I'm very happy with. This thing, it's sub $500, but it gives you features that you find in many premium scopes. And when you look through that trigger cam, you'll get an idea of what the image looks like, what I'm able to see downrange with it, what the field of view is, etc. For ammo, we're going to be running Outlier munitions 135 atip. Now, Outlier stepped up to support my channel, and I'd ask when you make your next ammunition purchase that you do the same. Consider Outlier. They've been great to me, very easy to work with, and really premium products. I think what you're going to find in this video is this ammunition is going to perform very well with regards to accuracy and velocity. From there, what are we going to do? So what is the process of truing your BC? Let's move into a section where I'm explaining what I'm going to do, and then I'll put it into action for you. Truing your BC. The process is actually relatively simple. What you're going to do is gather data out of your rifle, plug it into your ballistic calculator, and then make sure what you see downrange matches what the calculator says. If that's not the case, then you need to go in and make an adjustment. So first things first, when you set your calculator up, there's a couple of key things about the rifle that you have to make sure are correct. Scope height over bore. We're not talking about the height of your mount. We're talking about the actual height from the center of the scope to the center of the bore. On this rifle, it's roughly 2.5 inches, and that's what I've plugged into my Shooter Ballistic Calculator. You can find that on the App Store. I get a ton of questions around what calculator do I use. It's the Shooter Ballistic Calculator by Kennedy Development Group. It's been a great tool for me, and I think you're going to see in this video, it works very well. Once you're confident in your rifle information, next up, you're going to move into your calculator and plug in your bullet information. So you can find the BC of your bullet off of the box, online, whatever. Make sure that's plugged in. Next up, it's time to move down to the range and gather data. So let's talk through the process of doing that. So first up, what I want to do is is take my rifle down to 100 yards and get a solid 100-yard zero. So you're going to shoot, you're going to make sure your group is lined up dead center. You'll see in this clip right here, shooting this 135 atip, this rifle is very much zeroed. That group measures about 3/4 of an inch and it is dead nuts on. I'm happy with that zero. From there, I can go ahead and zero out my elevation turret to make sure that when it's on zero, that represents my 100-yard or in whatever zero you choose to run. Zero represents zero. It's repeatable and you're confident in that. It might take a couple of range trips to get the confidence, but you want to make sure that you are zeroed. The next piece that you have to do, we have to know our velocity. So in this case, I use my magneto speed. I put it on the front of the rifle and I'm going to fire a string of rounds across that magneto speed. In this case, I'm going to fire 10 rounds across the magneto speed of the 135 atip to get a solid velocity. I do this in 2 different strings, and you'll see between those 2 strings, I'm going to call my velocity about 2640. So we know the velocity, we know our 100-yard zero. From there, we're going to move out to a further distance and shoot. So for this video, I'm going to pop out to 1,000 yards. Now to choose your distance, you have to be far enough out that your velocity is roughly 1,400 feet per second on the bullet wherever you're shooting. You think about shooting closer distances, say 0 to 600. That's not so much based on your ballistic coefficient, that's more based on your bullet velocity to get your drop number. Once you get past that 600, 800 yard distance is where the bullet starts to lean on that BC number to really true up where it's going to land. So I'm going to move down to 1,000 yards, which is about where this 16-inch 6.5 Creedmoor with a 135 atip is running 1,400 yards. I'm going to go into my ballistic calculator, call up the data that I need to make that shot. Then I'm going to shoot, see where the bullet lands, then go back into my calculator, adjust the BC until the number that I'm actually shooting is what's displayed in the calculator. So let's go do that. Okay, now that we've got a solid 100-yard zero on our rifle and we have a confident velocity for the rifle, what do? We need to make sure that our ballistic calculator is set up properly to make our first shots out here at distance. So to do that, at least in the shooter app, there's a couple different things that we have to do. So for the rifle, you have to make sure that you've input the rate of twist, in this case 1 and 8 to the right. Very important is scope height over bore, not scope mount height, but the actual height from the center of the scope to the center of the bore. On this rifle, it measures about 2.5 inches, so that's what I've put in. Now, pertinent to the ammo, we have to make sure we have the proper velocity put in and the correct starting BC. So let me show you what that looks like for the shooter app. So I've already got the 6.5 Outlier loaded. I'm going to go into the ammo section. For this Ally 135 atip load, I'll go in and show you my starting settings. So I've already put in the velocity that I know from 100 yards. I'm going to call that 2645. Very confident in that based on the last string of fire where I measured those 5 rounds right there at that speed. So happy with that velocity. Velocity variation 15 feet per second. No ammo is going to be perfectly the same, so there is going to be some level of variation. I put in 15 kind of based on the SD that we saw in our chronograph. You come down, I'm running the G7 BC, which is correct for a boat tail type bullet. And I'm starting with 0.321, which is what Hornady publishes for this bullet. So we're going to start with book data and our measured velocity and a solid 100-yard zero. Zero range, 100 yards, altitude of about 1,250 feet. And today it's about 65 degrees, humidity is probably 40%. So that's what I'm going to start with. Now let me go back. I'm actually going to load this in. Now my distance I've already measured to my target out here is 1,025 yards. So what I want to do then is go ahead and calculate a drop. Now you see 1,025 yards is calling for 9.2 mils. Perfect. The other important thing to note, if you come across to the right, is the velocity. So when you're going to true your BC, you want to make sure your bullet velocity is in that 1,400 feet per second range. That transitions from being just speed to calculate your drop. So say out to about 600 yards, it's primarily bullet velocity that determines drop. You get out this far, we're overcoming velocity, and now it's going to be relying on that BC to drop into the target. So we're about 1,400 feet per second, which is solid for this 16-inch barrel. 9.2 mils. I'm going to go ahead and dial that onto my scope, and we'll put rounds on that target to see where we land. Now we're down behind the rifle. We're ready to set it up for our shots. So what I want to do is go ahead and dial on the 9.2 that's called for. Remember, that's our starting number. So what we're going to do from here would be go ahead and fire at least a round or a couple rounds, whatever you need to do to spot your impact and then make your corrections. So from here, we'll go ahead and load up and fire at least one round at 9.2 mils, see if I can catch a splash, and make a correction from there. I'm going to start one to the right. Okay. That dropped about a half low. Let's come up. I'm going to go 4/10. Okay. I'm going to cut that windage back one to the left edge. Impact. 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 Back. Back. Wow. Making that look so easy. All right, I'm very happy with that string of fire out there. My first round, you saw it dropped a little bit low. I was able to see that splash really well. So that 9.2 came down just below the plate. And what I had to do to get onto the plate was come up 4/10. So I need to go in and adjust my BC to a lower number so that it requires more elevation in the calculator to make that shot at 1025. So what that would look like in the shooter app, I'm going to go back into my ammo. I'm going to go in and edit the Ally 135 atip load. Now what I want to do is adjust this BC number lower and see where that gets me for 1025, everything else being the same. So you can see I just adjusted it down to 0.31. That's requiring 9.4. So I need to go a little bit further with that. Let's go down to 0.30. And that's calling for 9.6 mils, which is exactly where we were to get center hits on that plate. Now from here, I'm curious how that's going to look at distance. So I'm going to push out a little bit further, I think, and see if I can connect on a farther plate and see how the data matches up to what we actually have here in the calculator. This will be kind of a fun little experiment. Given the very respectable performance, they're at 1,025 yards. Let's push further. I've got my full-size IPSC out there at 1265. Now, after correcting the BC in my app, it's calling for 13.9 mils of elevation, which I'm going to go ahead, dial on, just like that. And then windage is going to be a tough one. It's pretty tricky out here today, actually. So here at the shooting position, it's coming from maybe that 2 o'clock. Wind flag appears to be pushing back toward me, maybe a little bit to the left. And I've got some decent mirage out there pushing left. Let's start 1.5 to the right. Hope we can see an impact. We'll call. Cut that back to 1. Okay. Actually, that was just off that left edge. Let's bracket it right here, like 1.25. 1.4. Pack. That was an impact. Hard to see my light. So had some challenging winds out there on that plate at 1265, had to chase it a little bit, but we did make a handful of impacts, which I think is respectable for a 16-inch 6.5 Creedmoor. Now the important part is around our bullet BC and our elevation number. So remember at 1,000 yards, I made that BC adjustment to bring the number in the calculator in line with what I actually saw on the scope. So I actually was using 9.6 mils at 1,000, adjusted that in the calculator so that it showed that at 1,025 yards. Then when I went out here to 1265, I dialed on 13.9 mils, which was called for in the calculator. And what you saw downrange is the elevation was very much in line with that number, which tells me that adjusted BC is very much correct. Now we can move down to shorter ranges and verify it, but given the change there at 1,000 and how correct that was, and then verifying it at 1265, I'm very confident that if I were shooting shorter distances, we would be just fine, especially say 600 and in, where we're relying more on velocity versus that BC number. So really kind of cool to be able to go in and true up your BC, is that's going to allow you to really dial in your bullet to your rifle to make those impacts at distance. All right, there you have it. Really not that hard to true up your data for your specific rifle and bullet. Let's quickly review what we saw in this video. So in this video, you saw me move down to 100 yards and shoot a sub-MOA group with this setup with the 135 atip from Outlier munitions. So very happy with the accuracy that I'm getting out of this rifle and confident in the zero that we were working with. Then you saw me run rounds across the chronograph to get an average velocity of about 2640 out of this 6.5 Creedmoor 16-inch. I plugged that into my calculator. I moved out to 1,025 yards where I shot my first round, 9.2 mils of elevation, which is what my calculator called for, using the published BC, G7 BC of 0.321 for that 135 atip. I was able to see my impact really clearly through the scope. I was able to measure it using the reticle. It landed 0.4 mils low. So from 0.2 mils, I dialed up 0.4 to 9.6. And then you saw me in the video rapidly put multiple rounds onto that plate into a very respectable group, considering the rate of fire. So I am confident that my data at 1,025 with this rifle was 9.6 mils. Then you saw me go into the calculator and adjust that G7 BC lower until the data in the calculator matched 9.6 mils, which is what we saw downrange. That was 0.300. So the BC isn't quite as high out of this setup as what's published by Hornady. Then to verify that, I pushed out to 1,265 yards, where the calculator called for 13.9 mils of elevation. And what you saw in that video was multiple impacts pending windage error. So I'm very confident that the adjustment that I made in this BC is correct and verified all the way out to 1,265 yards. Now you'll notice I didn't check it at closer distances, again, because BC isn't as important at the closer distances as it is out there, say 600, 800 yards and beyond. So I'm very confident if I were to shoot that 325 yard target or 300, 400, whatever, I'm going to make my impacts because my BC really didn't change that number that much in the calculator. So from here, let me know, what are your thoughts about this video? Did you enjoy this more instructional type video? Did you find value in watching? Are there other long-range concepts that you'd like to see me try to tackle and help you better understand? Now, the goal with this video would be for you to go out to the range, try this for yourself. If you've got questions about what I did in this video, or is there something that you need help with, let me know in the comments. I'd love to chat with you down below. Also, don't forget to check me out on Instagram at Mountains Mullets America. It's a great place for us to interact, chat about what I've got going on, and maybe I can help you on your long-range journey. Finally, I've seen a lot of growth on this channel recently, and I really appreciate each of you that have checked out my videos and helped support the channel. Now, how can you help me grow? That's through liking this video, commenting, best of all is subscribing. If you enjoy this kind of content, I hope you'll subscribe to my video so that you're next in line for the videos that I have coming. I got a lot of really cool things in the works, and I want you to be there. Check them out. Finally, if you made it this far, I really appreciate you sticking around to watch my video. I hope you'll stick around and join me in my next one. There's a lot of really cool stuff coming, and I hope to see you there. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.